up, everyone? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Niners News here on 49ers Hive. My name is Zach Hernandez. Today, I'm joined by my co-host Matt Llewellyn, and we are also joined by our guest co-host Dylan Frazier. And today, guys, we're going to be talking about some updates on the Raheem Mostert trade situation. Matt, last week, Raheem Mostert came out saying he wants out of the Bay Area, he wants more money, or he wants a team that will give him more money. Now he kind of turned around and his agent, Brett Tessler, said, not so fast. You know, maybe we're willing to make things work here. Do you think this is a sign that they were never really wanting to get out of the Bay Area?
I think it's a sign that he's walking back something that he put out there and had no leverage for. He had signed the deal. Everybody knew that he signed the deal. He has 2 years left on the deal. He had a good season, but he still hasn't proved anything long-term. He's still going to make, I think, 3.15 with his roster bonus and his signing bonus on top of his base salary. So it's not like he's not making anything. But I think that he put out feelers there to see if the team would address what he feels is him overperforming last year's contract. And when they didn't bite, he kind of had to walk that back. I also wouldn't be surprised if some of his teammates kind of hit him up in the DMs and are like, hey, dude, what are you doing? Like, we're getting ready for the season. We got a lot of stuff going on. We got to hashtag pay George Kittle. You know, we got to do all this stuff. And, you know, what you're doing is not helping, especially at a position where it's next man up for everybody. I mean, running backs are infinitely replaceable. So I think they tested the waters. And then when the team was like, no, you can go piss off, I think they walked that back because they do want to be here. I just think they were trying to leverage something more in a situation where they had no leverage.
I mean, great point. Dylan, let me read to you Ian Rappaport's tweet today. He said, quote, Olive Branch, 49ers running back Raheem Mostert spoke to a high-ranking member of the SF organization to clear the air and get on the same page moving forward, sources say. Asked about the situation being worked out, agent Brett Tessler said, hopefully that'll be the case. Do you think we're reading too much into it and that maybe it was just like preliminary discussions and, hey, you know what, let's just work something out? Or do you think that there are actual discussions going on to kind of bury the dirt and just kind of get over it?
Well, I think it would probably be somewhere in the middle of that. When Raheem Mostert he obviously wanted that more money. That's why he requested the trade. We all know that. And he probably said something and they were like, hey, we really got to focus on George Kittle. We need to pay George Kittle. No offense to Raheem Mostert, but George Kittle is more important to the 49ers as a whole than he is. And he probably is sitting there thinking, well, if you're going to not focus on me, I'll give you a reason to focus on me. And I don't think he ever, like Matt said, I don't think he ever wanted a trade. I think he may have been upset if it seemed like they were neglecting him. But I think he does. I think he's happy in San Francisco from everything I've ever seen from him. We definitely gave him a really good start, and well, not even a start. He's been plenty of places, but a really good opportunity. And I think he enjoys it here. Just my assumption, but I think he recognizes the fact that him as a running back, he knows that running backs, that their lifespan in the game is short. Like you're not going to be around for much longer, and he wants to try to make that money, and I can't fault him for that at all. I think he should make that money, and I would not be surprised to see if the 49ers do just give him a little bit more. Nothing crazy, but maybe just a little bit more to be like, all right, we understand you did outplay your contract last year, so we'll make it a little bit worthwhile. But they absolutely need to make George Kittle a priority first. Make sure you have enough money to pay him and still keep functioning, and then go ahead and help him out a little bit more.
Okay, so it's like, I think there's like a $2 million difference between him and Tevin Coleman, the highest paid running back on the team. And Matt, we talked about this the last time we talked about Raheem Mostert, and it kind of puts Tevin Coleman in a tough spot because when you come out publicly saying, I want as much as X, you know, that X, Tevin Coleman, is kind of like, whoa, why am I being dragged into this? The 49ers as a whole team kind of seem to be a brotherhood, but more specifically when you kind of break it down into the positional units, they're even closer. Do you think this will do, this at least has the potential to do any long-term damage between their relationship?
No, I think Tevin Coleman's a pretty upfront person, and he's, again, I alluded to somebody getting in his DMs. I wouldn't be surprised if Tevin Coleman sent him a text and was like, "Hey, man, why are you talking about my money? Like, don't put my name in your mouth. Like, this has nothing to do with me." It's one of those situations where, again, he tried to leverage something that he didn't really have, and he spoke out of turn, and I'm sure that somebody on the team corrected him. I mean, that's what brothers do for each other. That's what teammates do for each other. You pick each other up when somebody's stepping out of line, you bring them back in, and, I don't think it's going to have any long-term effect. This team is very tight-knit. They seem to really enjoy each other, really have each other's backs. And so I think this is just one of those little glitches that you have, and it's great to get it out before training camp starts. So that way, once everybody's in there, once everybody's in pads doing their thing, you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. So it's good to get it out in the off season. But still, it's one of those things where you can't put somebody else's name in your mouth, especially when it comes to money. Don't talk about other people's money. Don't talk about other people's wives. Like, there's certain rules, and Mostert kind of broke those rules. But again, considering how tight knit this team is, I wouldn't be surprised if some of the team leaders took him aside and was like, "Hey, man, we know you want to get the bag. Everybody wants you to get money and get paid, but now's not the time for that, especially how you're going about doing it." And as we addressed last week, that's the biggest thing, is how are you going about trying to get money and trying to get paid? Are you doing it the right way? Are you being stand-up about it? Or are you going about it in a way that could be detrimental to the team if you continue to push? So it's good that he's kind of walked back some of these comments, because it tells me that, hey, he recognizes that probably wasn't the best way to go about it. And we have unfinished business from the Super Bowl last year. So I'm going to let it go, see how things play out. I'm going to play to the best of my ability, be there for the team, just like they were there for me, and we'll see what happens.
It's funny you say that, because I think sometime last week there was a fan, or at least some troll, who made a fake Brett Tesler account, Raheem Mostert's agent. Instead of an L, he used like a capital I. And he tweeted out, after, much thought and conversation with my client, we realized 49ers are the best place for him to be. We have, cut off our trade request, blah, blah, blah. And people were like, yeah, you came to your senses. This is exactly what you should have done. And then it kind of was clear that, oh, this is a troll. This isn't a real tweet. But people were kind of like, that probably would have been the smartest thing for the agent to do. And now it kind of seems like that agent took a page out of the troll's book and is actually doing it. Dylan, if Raheem Mostert thinks, it's more him than the system, and to me, that's what I get out of this. If he's telling the Niners, you wouldn't have gotten these type of production with any back there, only me. What other teams do you think he could go to and have similar success, if any?
Well, I think that while it is more of the system than it is him, I think he is like a great running back for the system, and probably the best one that we have on the roster. And so I would say he is the best running back for the type of offense that we run on our roster. And I think that showed. That's why he did so well. But it's not only like where he would fit in, but it's also who's looking for a running back that's willing to pay for that in the trade. I mean, in my opinion, you don't see too many running backs that are starting running backs just get traded around, because teams would rather just take their chances signing a free agent or drafting one. So, I mean, I don't know how many teams are desperately looking for running backs, because there's a lot of teams out there that have their guy already. I mean, and so I don't know who would really be seeking a running back that hasn't proven a whole lot. He proved he was good in the stint that he had, but he hasn't proven longevity yet. And B, somebody, that same person that would be willing to pay how much it would take for San Francisco to say, yeah, we'll trade our starting running back.
That's a good point, especially after the draft and free agency has already concluded. Most of these teams are ready to roll into the season with who they have on their roster, barring any injuries, of course. So it's kind of really late into the year to try and request a trade. And he was putting the 49ers at a tough position to where it's like they almost don't want to like look disrespectful and be like, good luck trying to get a trade. But at the same time, it's like, where are you going to go? You signed this contract last year. We're making good on our end, make good on your end. Matt, according to Peter King's report, he could be out as late as October, which would make him miss essentially the first quarter of the season. Is that concerning to you, or do you think he's still somewhat on the same timeline as before?
I think Peter King's bored and he has nothing better to do. And it's the off season and it's slow and everybody's desperate to talk about something other than what's going on in the country right now. I know that report came out earlier today, and actually Deebo Samuel already responded on his Instagram, and he said, quote, "Can't put a time frame on nothing you don't see working. Don't believe everything you see on the media. This God work. Watch him work." So to me, that tells me that Peter King is just, saying stuff. And this is what reporters do. They throw some bait out into the water and see if they can get a bite. His Monday morning quarterback article is like his bread and butter. That's what he does. He needs some stuff for it. There's not a lot going on right now. For me, if the player says that he's doing good, sometimes that can be a fabrication and you think, oh, players are always optimistic. He was going to be out until at least week 1 anyway. The way things are going, I would say he'd probably be back week 2, week 3 at the latest. So that's still in September. October, worst case scenario, maybe. But from the way it's sounding with Deebo Samuel, unless you hear something come out of the team, I would take Peter King's report with a grain of salt, to be honest.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. And this report did come out kind of in the middle of June. And then it kind of got a lot more traction today. And it was kind of confusing because I'm kind of like, okay, but maybe something else happened. But no, it turns out he was just kind of retouching on the situation. So, I mean, people are kind of freaking out. But at the same time, it's like that's kind of the back end of the timeline that he originally said. Dylan, do you think this gives a younger, or maybe not necessarily younger, but another receiver who hasn't been producing as much, aka Dante Pettis, a chance to break out?
No. One, because if we haven't seen it yet from Dante, I'm not expecting it. It would be a happy surprise, but I'm just not expecting it at this point. And I agree with Matt. I think that we'll probably see Deebo probably around right when the season opens back up. And even if we don't, let's not forget what our offense was. It was run the ball every play until they make you stop it and then throw to George Kittle. So, I'm not expecting too much of a breakout from anybody else. And we still don't even know. I mean, if it does take until October for him to heal up, we don't even know if the NFL season will have started by then. So there's just way too much to think about there. I think it will have started by then, but still, I don't think Deebo's injury will take that long.
Okay. Now, Matt, Dylan touched upon the running aspect of this offense there. Deebo is a large part of that. He does a lot of these end rounds, stuff like that. Do you think that we talked about kind of his injury and how it affects him passing wise, cutting wise? Do you think there's any difference with how it is kind of taking those end arounds?
No. And Jimmy G is going to have 4,500 yards and 35 touchdowns this year. So it doesn't matter anyway. No, in all seriousness, no, once he's back, they're not going to let him on the field until he can do all the things that he needs to do, especially with how sensitive feet can be from a medical perspective. They're not going to put him out there before he's ready. Because the worst thing that can happen is you have another Trent Taylor situation where, something doesn't feel right. You go in, you get a second procedure done, and then all of a sudden you've opened yourself up to infection and a longer recovery time. So, yeah, for me, no, they're not going to put him out there before that. So once he's back on the field, he's going to be the same dog that we've seen, the same guy that runs into contact, that wants to bowl everybody over and, wants to make those big plays, just pancaking defenders. So for me, once he's back out on the field, he's back out on the field. He'll be same old Deebo.
Okay. Yeah. Physical, very, very physical. Probably one of the most physical receivers we have on the team. Back to you, Dylan. Do you think that even with some games missed, he'll be able to improve, at least stat-wise, on his rookie year?
I don't see why not. We didn't see Deebo turn into any sort of beast until halfway through the year, in my opinion. I mean, that's whenever he really started to get comfortable with the scheme, and it wasn't until around the end of the season and playoff time that we were like, okay, Deebo is the truth. And so I think that was just him getting used to the offense and getting used to the NFL, which is natural for any receiver or any position in switching from college to NFL. So I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he came out and was. It might take him a little while to get back going from the injury, as it would any player. But I wouldn't expect to see too much of a change. I think he'll still be that dog that he was.
I do too. I think that, he came I want to say 20, 30 yards shy of topping 1,000 yards, which he would be the first receiver to do it since Jerry Rice, scrimmage yard, I should add, since Jerry Rice. And it's just a hell of a feat. And like you said, he really didn't kind of turn it on until the second half of the year. And it's funny because it reminds you of the second half of Dante Pettis' rookie year where he just caught fire. Matt, do you think there's any worry, any concern for a sophomore slump?
To me, a little bit. And the reason why I think Debo really took off is because he had the tutelage of Emmanuel Sanders. He really took off when Emmanuel Sanders came in, and kind of, defenses had to play Emmanuel Sanders and be like, okay, well, we know this guy's established, so we have to cover him. Now you're going to line him up against, opposite of Brandon Ayuk, Trent Taylor, who we, don't know what we're going to get with him, Jalen Hurd, who we don't know where we're going to get with him. So it's a lot of unknowns surrounding Debo, and because of the impact that he had in the playoffs, and especially the first half of the Super Bowl, I think teams are going to key on him and George Kittle and try to make Jimmy and the offense, beat them in other areas. So I could see a struggle for a little bit until Ayuk and some of those other guys establish themselves to take a little bit of the pressure off. So Debo has all the talent in the world, and I'm fully prepared for him to, catch fire at the back end once everything kind of settles down. Also, I know that Dylan says that maybe a Dante Pettis resurgence would be a pleasant surprise. I think so too. The talent is there. Everything that he's missing is between the ears. So if he comes in and can stay confident, there's no reason why he can't get back to where he was too. It's only his third year. We're talking about sophomore slumps. He had the sophomore slump to end all sophomore slumps. So there's nowhere to go for him but up at this point. So if they can get all that together, Debo might tail off a little bit at the beginning, but I expect him to pick it up by the end.
Yeah, I was talking to KSBW's Drea Blackwell, and we kind of agreed, although Dante Pettis had a really, really poor sophomore year, he's extremely talented. The guy has it all. He's shown his rookie year that he could put it all together, and when he does, he's one of the top, third receivers in the NFL. He's extremely quick on his feet. He's bright. He's got great hands. So if he could just keep all of those aspects together, the 49ers have a fantastic trio of receivers in Debo, Pettis, Ayuk if he comes along, Jalen Hurd returning from injury. I mean, we've talked about this, till the cows come home. If it pans out the way it should pan out, if these guys return fully healthy and they're able to contribute, this aerial attack is going to be unstoppable, and it might be a problem of not enough food to go around. So
absolutely. And that's one of those things where, everybody wants the Julio Jones receiver. Everybody wants the Odell Beckham, the clear number one guy. And maybe the 49ers don't have that. But what they do have is 4 number twos. And I'll take 4 number twos over 1 number one any day of the week, So again, it does come down to that problem. George Kittle is the number one. That's where we start and end. George Kittle is the guy. If you have a number 2 receivers around him, I mean, sky's the limit for the offense.
That's one of the things that I actually love about our receivers specifically. And I mean, you could make the same argument for our running backs almost, but there's so many what ifs, what if this works out, that some of them are bound to happen. We can't trust that everybody on our receiving core, while they all have potential, I believe, we can't trust that every one of them is going to work out. But let's say a Trent Taylor works out. He comes back from injury and reconnects with Jimmy like he did. Or let's say Jalen Hurd turns out to be that beast that we think he is. Let's say Dante Pettis finally puts it together and returns to that form that he was in his rookie year. Let's say Ayuk comes out and plays like Kyle expects him to. Let's say Debo comes back from injury and keeps playing like he did. Let's say Kendrick Bourne finally takes that next step, that he's working very hard to prove to us that he on social media, he tells us all the time, like, hey, I'm there. I'm like that, and I am ready. And I'd love to see it happen. There's so many, if this works out on our team, that, I mean, statistically, we can't miss out on all of them. Somebody has to hit.
A lot of kind of back and forth between the NFL and the NFLPA regarding players not wanting to go back unless the NFL agreed to daily testing. On Monday, the NFL agreed to do such. And do you think that this is a huge step and, the fact promising that we will actually have a season this year?
Well, there was going to be a season regardless. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and if you take an entire season off, that's too much money out of everybody's pocket. You see the same thing with the other major sports. They're modifying what they're doing, but all of them are trying to get back up and running because there's just too much revenue that's going to be lost if they don't. I think daily testing is a step in the right direction. I know that there was this huge player movement of like, hey, we need daily tests, and that went out on Sunday. And, a lot of people are going to be like, this vindicates the players. But for me, I think this was always in the NFL's pocket, and they were just trying to, hammer some stuff out. Because if you look at the private sector, you're looking at anywhere from 5 to 14 day turnaround times for COVID tests. And for the NFL, that's not good enough. So they have to secure, hey, once we get these tests, we need to get the tests, we need to get the lab to run the tests, and we need to be able to get the results in a timely manner. That's a lot of administrative kind of, stuff that needs to be hammered out. I think it was a complicated situation. And the one area where the NFL really dropped the ball, because I really do think that they care about the players and they want to have a season. I mean, they obviously do. The one area where they really dropped the ball was communication and not being transparent with what they were doing with the NFLPA, who then would relay that to the players. I think the NFLPA also, they don't have the most sterling reputation these days. They're kind of viewed as kind of like a league puppet, like a league show. I think communication was just lost all the way around. I think players were understandably concerned, but it's really good that we got it out of the way. And it's just a step that we need to ensure that everybody can, be safe while we're rolling towards the NFL season. Because, I mean, once everybody gets into, testing and training camp and stuff, the NFL is uniquely positioned as a sport where contact is going to happen on every play. And that distancing that you can get in some other games like baseball or maybe like soccer, it's not going to be there for the NFL. These players are going to pile on top of each other. So they need to have even more precautions to ensure that everybody's safe.
Yeah. And, just I'm going to read NFLPA's statement real quick. Today they released, our union has been pushing for the strongest testing, tracing, and treatment protocols to keep our players safe. The testing protocols we agreed to are one critical factor that will help us return to work safely and gives us the best chance to play and finish the season. Dylan, do you agree with Matt that the players and the NFLPA are kind of taking a little bit too much credit for this, that the NFL kind of had this in the plans and the works this whole time?
I mean, I genuinely don't know. I think that I would think that the NFL, this is a weird statement to say, I would think the NFL is smart enough to know that something this big, that they need to communicate. And so that's the only thing that gives me a little bit of pause. Maybe it was everything that Matt's saying, like they had it all done, they just didn't communicate well. But you have to. Like that's not something you can just forget to do. Like that's a pretty big thing. You have to communicate with your players because your players are going to be on that front line of things. So I genuinely don't know at this point. But if all that it was just poor communication, then good on the NFL for working towards it. But and if it wasn't in the plans, then respect to the NFL for being able to put out those statements and all that very quickly.
Well, and here's the other thing too, and I don't want this to be understated. We went through a long period of time where everything was on the downtick. Everything was going really well, and now in the last couple of weeks, there's been a dramatic uptick in cases, the number of cases that are going around, that could also play a part in why the NFL wasn't necessarily comfortable just putting everything out there. Because with this uptick, it's like, well, okay, we don't want to look like that we're, uber privileged because we're a rich multinational, conglomerate that can just get testing whenever we want to. You know what I mean? There's optics that have to be leveled from all sides. The American people, like that patriotism kind of thing, is really important to the NFL as far as their image is concerned. And so they're very wary of how, it would look if they were just like, well, we're just going to abscond with all these testings. We don't worry about anybody else and stuff like that. I think they were up against the gun. I think there was a lot of things that weren't necessarily as easy as people would make it out to be. But I also understand from the players' perspectives where they want to be safe too. We want everybody to be safe. This thing it's been crazy. 2020 has been the worst year I've ever lived through. It's been awful. So everybody wants sports to get back to, just for levity, just to take a break from all this stuff. So I don't think that the NFL, and I want to say the NFL has no excuse to not communicate at least that too, if there were difficulties. I'm not going to let them off the hook. I just think that there's a lot that goes into this that people don't necessarily take into account. It's really easy to get riled up on a Twitter hashtag, without knowing because you're like 53 players on the team, 32 teams, not to mention coaches, trainers, staff, all that stuff. This is by far the biggest sport as far as testing goes. The biggest number of people that have to be tested for a sports league. It's on a completely different scale. So I just think there was a lot of things that went into this, but I think that this could have been handled way better rather than the week of training camp opening.
Yeah, real quick, Dylan, I just want to say before we even move forward, I should let me actually read the NFL's plan here. ESPN's Dan Graziano tweeted out, the NFL and NFLPA have agreed on testing protocols. They will start with daily testing for the first 2 weeks, then go to every other day if the positive test rate falls below 5%. If it doesn't, then they will keep testing daily. So it seems like at the very least, they'll be getting tested every other day.
Yeah, well, and let me jump in there too, because I saw a story. I think I don't want to attribute. I think it was the 49ers for NBC Sports or something like that. When 49ers players show up, they're going to be tested twice before they're allowed into the facility. So when they show up, they're going to test. If they test negative, they have to either go home or go to the hotel for 2 days and quarantine themselves. Then they show back up, they test again. If they test negative, then they're allowed into the facility. So on a team-by-team basis, not to mention just the league, the teams also have the opportunity to go above and beyond what the NFL lays out. And I expect that all are going to do that in some capacity.
Interesting. Dylan, I've seen some kind of new plans laid out for helmets with masks and anything to kind of make the players feel more safe or be more safe. Do you think that's something we'll see this year?
I think that steps into a territory because whenever there were early on in the world of COVID, I remember seeing like there were ideas about what you would do to a helmet, and I saw a few players speak out and say, "Have you ever tried to play football in heat with that on your face? Because that won't go well." So I don't have a solution, and I'm sure there's a lot of other people that don't either. I would be surprised to see them alter the helmets in any way to try to protect it, just because I don't know what that does to the players as well as basically I don't know if that's even a possibility or something that the players are looking for, instead of maybe just making sure that the players that they're playing against are safe.
Yeah, that's the point. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, and to that effect, I think doing something legitimately to the helmets while they're playing is a big ask. I know that I've heard players, I think Pat McAfee said on his show that helmets are uncomfortable to wear. They're super tight. They're already not the most comfortable thing. A lot of guys get like headaches or their ears start to hurt because, they fit them so that you don't get concussed. I think a good solution would be to create a gaiter type of thing that you could slip over the helmet when you're on the sideline, or you wear a mask when you have your helmet off on the sideline. That way you're minimizing exposure. But on the field of play, I just think it's going to be really difficult to put something on there. I know that there was these like mock-ups or whatever of like face shields and stuff. They were bullshit. I mean, let's be real. They were terrible. I know it looks cool and everybody's like, oh, well, let's give them a a Judge Dredd helmet or like a Dr. Doom helmet, It's not feasible. And like Dylan said, on a hot day, I mean, I played high school football. I'm not going to pretend like I was like some superstar, but even in high school, putting that helmet on in spring practice when it's like 95 degrees outside, it's awful. I mean, you're in pads too, everything. It's, you take your t-shirt off at the end of the day and hang it up on a line and it starches itself stiff because you sweat so much. It's just, I think that there is going to be a limit. And let's not underestimate too, what we always talk about with our good friend Eric Crocker, who judges the players based on their swag levels. Like, I don't think the face covering on the helmet, as silly as it sounds in a pandemic, I think that players still want to look good. And if you look good, you feel good, you play good. So I think there's limits to what you can do on the field. But I do think there are a lot of viable off-field and sideline solutions to, limiting exposure.
Dylan, I'm going to end it with this here. The NBA recently announced that they tested all of their players and none of them tested positive for COVID. If you could name a couple of steps that the NFL you feel needs to do in order to be able to get to that place a couple of weeks after they're kind of getting things rolling.
I mean, that's tough. I think that the NBA having 0 positive results is actually a great step in the right direction as far as sports as a whole. But I don't know how you could pull that off with football. A bubble would be a lot tougher, I would assume. I mean, I guess you could try to pull it off, but I would doubt if the NFL takes that approach. But I mean, it is something to say that it is possible to get players to a point where every player that they are playing against is safe. And I think that's the ultimate goal of what they're trying to go, what the NFLPA and all these players and the NFL are trying to get to is, well, we may not be able to add a mask to your helmet, but we can try to make sure that every player that you are in contact with is safe and does not. I mean, to a degree, there's countless of other things that could be in play, but to a degree, making it as safe as possible for these players to return to their jobs.
Yeah, well, and I do want to say you hit the nail on the head where you talk about the NBA bubble and them having 0 positive tests. They're all in one centralized location. The NFL has already said all 32 teams are going to be at their own facilities. Now you're talking about multi-state, with a more numerous amounts of players and staff and everything. It's going to be so hard, and I hope that they could do it. I just think that the people that are like, oh, well, look at the NBA. It's comparing apples to watermelons, man, because it's an entirely different thing. You hope that they keep it as safe as possible, and I think that today, the daily testing and stuff like that, that's going to be a step in the right direction. But I think that people need to buckle up and be prepared for there to be, some of their players, their favorite players, to test positive. It's just going to be how it is.
I would like to see organizations individually, whether it's an NFL mandated thing or if the teams just step up and say, hey, this is what we need to do, create some sort of bubble system where while you can't just do a bubble for all 32 NFL teams, but like the 49ers as a whole say, our players stay at this hotel, they do not leave, and we test them. We keep them safe. So, I mean, that might be a good step into trying to make sure the players are safe. And if every NFL team, which I know is asking a lot, if every NFL team could follow those specific ideas and keep players safe, then you can go into a game when there's no fans. The people you're accounted for are as safe as they can possibly be, and the people on the other side are as safe as they can possibly be. You are lowering the risk immensely.
All right, guys, I think we're going to end it on that note. Make sure you follow us on Twitter. Our handles are below on the screen. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to our channel, and comment your thoughts below.
Go ahead and hit the bell for all your notifications. We're bringing you 49ers news every day of the week.
Thanks, guys.
Go 49ers.